Pain arrived before consciousness. Zafira's first awareness was the fire in her ribs. Each shallow breath felt like broken glass grinding against her lungs. Her eyes remained closed against the stabbing light that penetrated even through her eyelids. The heat was merciless, unrelenting. The kind of heat that announced itself not just through temperature, but through the taste of copper on the tongue and the feeling that the air itself had teeth. She tried to move. Her body refused the command. Crimson sand pressed against her face. She could feel individual grains working their way into the cuts along her temple, each one a tiny needle of agony. The wind howled overhead, carrying more sand, more heat, more pain. Her left leg throbbed with a deep bone-level wrongness that suggested it would never work properly again. If she lived long enough for that to matter. The thought drifted through her mind without emotion. Some distant part of her brain, the part still capable of rational analysis despite the trauma, recognized the symptoms. Severe dehydration, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, hours remaining, perhaps 6 if she was fortunate, 3 if she was not. Fortune had already abandoned her in this wasteland. Memory crashed in like a wave. The family gathering, her father's face carved from stone and just as forgiving. The formal announcement of her betrothal to Lord Kavros of House Drell, a man she had met twice in her 28 years. A man whose eyes held the same cold calculation as her father's. A man who saw her not as a person, but as a treaty made flesh. She had said no. The word had felt impossibly small in that enormous hall. The ceiling soared 40 feet above, decorated with the banners of House Talon's 3-century reign. The walls bore portraits of ancestors who had built the family's power through precisely the kind of strategic marriages she was now refusing. 27 members of the extended family had attended. All of them had stared at her as if she had committed not just rebellion, but sacrilege. Her father had not raised his voice. That would have been beneath his dignity. He had simply looked at her with eyes that had watched her take her first steps, that had once held something resembling warmth, and said 4 words: "You shame us all." She had stood her ground, explained that she could not bind herself to a man she did not know, could not respect, could not envision building any kind of life with, that she understood the political advantages but believed there had to be another way, that the Valoran Empire's strength should not require daughters to be traded like currency. Her mother had looked away. Her brothers had stepped forward. The formal family meeting had transformed into something else, something brutal. She had fought back. Valorans were not weak regardless of gender. She had trained in combat arts, as all nobles did, but there were 3 of them, and they were not fighting to subdue. They were fighting with intent, with purpose, with father's cold approval watching from his chair. They had beaten her unconscious. She had woken in a transport vessel, her oldest brother, Kael, at the controls. Her middle brother, Dren, beside her, his knuckles still split from where they had connected with her face. No one spoke. The silence held more weight than any words could have carried. They had landed on Korath Prime, a wasteland planet, barely habitable. The crimson deserts stretched in every direction, broken only by the occasional rock formation, thrust up like the bones of some long-dead god. The twin suns beat down without mercy. The atmospheric readings showed breathable air barely, and temperatures that would kill in 12 hours without proper equipment. Durin had dragged her from the transport. Kael had removed her emergency beacon. Her mother's last gift, given on her 16th birthday, meant to keep her safe in the event of crisis. They had crushed it beneath their boots. Then they had activated a different beacon, a distress signal, set to broadcast on restricted frequencies. They had placed it on her broken body, not mercy, something else. She had been too injured to understand at the time. "Father says to tell you this," Kael had spoken then, the only words exchanged during the entire ordeal. "House Talon will announce your tragic death in a shuttle accident. You will be mourned. You will be honored. The marriage alliance with House Drell will proceed with your cousin Mira instead. The family's standing will be preserved." He had paused. Something that might have been regret flickered across his face. Or perhaps just the harsh light creating shadows where none existed. "You were always the smart one, Zeph. You should have known better." They had left her there. The transport's engines had roared. Dust had billowed. And then there was only silence and heat and the growing certainty that she would die alone in this wasteland, killed by the people who had once sworn to protect her. Hours had passed, or days. Time lost meaning when consciousness came and went like tides. She had tried to crawl. Her leg had screamed in protest. She had made it perhaps 10 feet before collapsing. The distress beacon on her chest continued its silent broadcast, calling out to emptiness, announcing her location to no one who cared. Except someone had answered. Zafira became aware of a new sound cutting through the wind. Mechanical, regular, the hum of environmental systems working overtime. Footsteps, heavy boots on sand, getting closer. She wanted to call out. Her throat was too dry. The sound that emerged was barely a whisper. Hey! The voice was male, deep, concerned, speaking in standard the common tongue of the galaxy but with an accent she recognized. Human. Terran. Can you hear me? She forced her eyes open. The light stabbed. She blinked against tears and sand and managed to focus. He knelt beside her. The armor he wore was standard Terran Defense Force issue. Battered, well-maintained, but clearly seeing active service for years. His helmet retracted as she watched, folding back into the collar of his suit. The face beneath was weathered, lined with the kind of creases that came from squinting against harsh environments and harder decisions. His eyes were a pale gray, the color of storm clouds over water. He looked to be in his late 30s, and he was looking at her not with the disgust or pity she expected, but with simple human concern. I'm going to check your injuries, he said. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, gentle despite the armor. A medical scanner hummed to life. My name is Thane, Captain Thane Aldrich, Terran Defense Force. I picked up your distress beacon. Zafira tried to speak, failed, tried again. Why? The question came out as barely more than breath, but he understood. Because you sent out a distress call. That means you need help. His scanner beeped. The sound was not encouraging. His expression remained carefully neutral, but she saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. Professional concern, the kind that came from someone who had seen trauma before and knew exactly how bad this was. All right, he said after a moment, I need to be straight with you. Your leg's fractured in 3 places. You've got internal trauma and you're severely dehydrated. You need medical attention immediately. My ship is about 3 kilometers from here. I'm going to carry you. It's going to hurt. I'm sorry. No. The word surprised her. It had come from somewhere instinctive. Valorans did not accept help from humans. Humans were primitive, barely 2 centuries into space travel. Their technology crude, their civilization young and violent and unstable. Everything she had been taught said that accepting help from this man would be degrading. But everything she had been taught had also said that family was sacred, that loyalty flowed upward to the house, that duty superseded personal desire, and her family had left her here to die. Thane must have seen something in her expression. He sat back on his heels, giving her space. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, gentler. I don't know what happened to you, but I can see this wasn't an accident. Someone did this deliberately. She wanted to deny it. The words would not come. Where I come from, Thane continued, we have a saying, do what's right, not what's easy. Right now, what's right is getting you medical attention. What's easy would be respecting your wishes and leaving you here. I'm not going to do that. I am. Her voice cracked. She swallowed, tried again. I am Valoran, House Talon, noble born. You are. She could not finish. Even in her state, the conditioning ran deep. Saying it out loud would acknowledge the hierarchy that had defined her entire existence. Human Thane finished for her. I know. Your people consider mine primitive. Maybe you're right. But this primitive human isn't going to let you die in the desert because of pride or protocol or whatever else is stopping you from accepting help. He moved carefully, sliding one arm beneath her knees and another behind her back. She gasped as her damaged legs shifted. White-hot agony shot through her entire body. For a moment, she thought she would pass out. His grip tightened, stabilizing her, waiting for the worst of the pain to pass. I've got you, he said. Deep breaths, stay with me. And then he lifted. The world spun. She had not realized how lightheaded she was until the change in elevation. Thane adjusted his grip, moving with careful precision. Despite his armor and weapons, despite the harsh environment, he held her as if she was something precious. Not valuable in the sense of political currency or strategic advantage, simply precious because she was a person in need. The concept was so alien to her upbringing that she could not quite process it. He began walking. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions. The twin suns beat down without mercy. Heat shimmered off the sand in waves that distorted the horizon. Thane's armor worked to regulate temperature. She could hear the system straining, but sweat still beaded on his face. Each step was deliberate, careful. He adjusted his grip every few minutes, ensuring her damaged leg remained as stable as possible. They traveled in silence for the first kilometer. Zafira drifted in and out of consciousness. Pain was a constant companion. But so was something else. Something she had not felt in the family hall when she had refused the marriage. Something she had not felt when her brothers had beaten her. Something she had not felt waking alone in the desert. Safety. This stranger, this human, this man from a species her people dismissed as inferior, was carrying her to safety, asking nothing in return, expecting no gratitude or payment or political favor, simply doing what he had said, what was right, not what was easy. Your species is strange, she heard herself say. The words came out slurred, pain and dehydration making thought difficult. Thane glanced down at her. A slight smile touched the corner of his mouth. Yeah, we get that a lot. Valorans consider humans dangerous, unpredictable. Your emotions make you weak. Your tutors taught you that. She nodded. Even that small movement sent fresh waves of pain through her skull. They weren't completely wrong, Thane said. Emotions do drive us to do irrational things, like hiking 3 kilometers through a deadly desert to answer a distress call that could have been a trap. A trap. The thought had not occurred to her. But of course, the beacon on her chest was not standard Valoran emergency equipment. Her brothers had placed it there deliberately. Anyone answering the call would be walking into an unknown situation. Possibly hostile, probably dangerous. And this man had come anyway. Why, she asked again. Because someone needed help. That's enough. They crested a dune. Thane paused, checking his navigation systems, adjusted their heading slightly, continued walking. His breathing had grown heavier. The armor could only compensate so much. Carrying another person, even one as light as she was by human standards, through this heat was taking its toll. 10 years ago, Thane said suddenly, I lost my sister. Her name was Bryn. She was 19, smart, funny, planning to go to university. She was dating someone. He seemed fine at first. Then he started getting possessive, controlling. She tried to break it off. He paused. The silence stretched. Zafira realized she was holding her breath. He killed her, beat her to death in her own apartment. By the time anyone found her, it was too late. The words were delivered without emotion, but Zafira could hear what lay beneath. The kind of grief that time had not healed only taught him to carry differently. I was deployed off-world, couldn't get back in time, couldn't save her, couldn't do anything but stand at her funeral and wonder if I'd ignored some sign, some warning. If I could have stopped it, if I'd just paid more attention. He shifted his grip again, careful with her leg. I swore I'd never let that happen again. If I could stop it, if I could help, I would, no matter what it might, no matter who it inconvenienced, because my sister died alone and scared and I wasn't there. But you sent out a distress beacon, and I'm here now, so that's why. Zafira felt moisture on her face. For a moment she thought it was blood from her head wound. Then she realized she was crying. The tears left tracks through the dust on her cheeks. She had not cried when her father condemned her, had not cried when her brothers beat her, had not cried waking alone in the desert. But this man's simple honesty, his raw grief transformed into purpose, broke something inside Twin. My family left me here today, she whispered. I refused an arranged marriage. It was seen as unforgivable, disgraceful. They brought me here. They left me. My father gave the order. My brothers carried it out. My mother said nothing. Thane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge she had not heard before. Anger, controlled but present. Where I come from, that's not family. That's betrayal. In Valoran culture, I don't care about Valoran culture. The words were blunt, not cruel but absolutely firm. Some things transcend culture. like not leaving your daughter to die in a wasteland because she wanted to choose her own path. They walked on. The second kilometer passed. Zafira's consciousness wavered. She fought to stay present, to remain aware, but her body was failing. The blood loss, the dehydration, the trauma, all of it pressing down like physical weight. She became dimly aware of new sounds, the hum of a ship's systems, cooler air, the sensation of movement as Thane climbed a ramp, artificial lights blessedly dim after the harsh desert glare. Almost there, Thane said. Stay with me, just a little longer. He laid her carefully on what felt like a medical table, soft, conforming to her body. Diagnostic equipment hummed to life around her. She heard him moving quickly, efficiently, commands spoken to the ship's AI, medical protocols initializing. This is going to hurt, he warned, but it's going to save your life. She wanted to tell him she trusted him. The words would not form. Darkness pulled at the edges of her vision. The medical systems activated. Pain exploded through her body. Not the dull, constant ache of her injuries, but sharp, precise agony as nanites went to work repairing tissue damage, knitting bone, stopping internal bleeding. She heard herself scream, felt Thane's hand on her shoulder. Steady, present, an anchor in the storm of sensation. I know, just breathe, it's working. You were going to make it. Time became meaningless. There was only pain and the sound of Thane's voice and the knowledge that she was not alone, that someone had answered her distress call, that someone had chosen to help her when her own blood had chosen to let her die. Gradually and possibly, the pain began to recede. Her breathing eased. The fire in her leg cooled to mere discomfort. She felt strength returning to her limbs, not much, but enough. Enough to know she would live. She opened her eyes. The ship's medical bay was small but well-equipped, functional rather than luxurious. The kind of space maintained by someone who understood that equipment saved lives and treated it accordingly. Thane sat on a stool beside the table watching the medical readouts. His armor was retracted now, showing the flight suit beneath. He looked exhausted. She wondered how long the treatment had taken. Hours, probably. He had stayed the entire time. Welcome back, he said with a tired smile. How do you feel? Alive. The word came easier now. Her throat was still dry, but the rawness had faded. I should not be, but I am. Yeah, human medical technology has its advantages. He offered her a water container. Small sips. Your system needs to adjust. The water tasted like mercy, cool and clean, and everything the desert had denied her. She forced herself to drink slowly, despite wanting to drain the entire container. Thane watched, ready to intervene if necessary, but she maintained control. The scan showed something, he said after a moment. His expression had shifted, concerned again. Under your left shoulder blade, it's a tracking device, still active, sophisticated, Valoran military grade. Zafira's hand moved instinctively to her back. She could not reach the spot he indicated, but she knew what he was talking about. All noble children received identification implants at birth. She had never questioned it, never thought about it as anything other than a tradition. My family, she said slowly, understanding, crystallizing like ice in her chest. They left me the distress beacon. They wanted someone to find me, but they left the tracking implant active. They're monitoring my location. To confirm you died, or to send someone to finish what they started if the desert did not. The implications settled between them. Heavy, undeniable. We need to move, Thane said. Get you to a Terran outpost, proper medical facilities, somewhere safe. It's 4 days' journey from here. They will know if I move, if I am taken anywhere. The tracking signal is going to show you traveling to Terran space regardless. Question is, do you want to be healthy and defended when they come looking, or still injured and vulnerable? Put that way, the choice was obvious. Still, Zafira hesitated. Leaving this place meant truly abandoning to her old life. As long as she remained on Karath Prime, there was the faint, desperate possibility that somehow things could be undone. That this was all a mistake, a test, something other than the complete betrayal it appeared to be. But she knew better. Her father's face when she had refused the marriage had held no warmth, no flexibility. Only the cold certainty of someone who had already made his decision and would not be swayed by sentiment or compassion or any recognition that his daughter was a person with her own thoughts and desires. She thought of Thane's sister, Bryn, 19 years old and trying to escape an abusive situation, dying alone because help had not arrived in time. She thought of Thane himself, walking into unknown danger to answer a distress call, carrying her 3 kilometers through hostile terrain, staying with her through hours of painful treatment, asking nothing in return. She thought of everything she had been taught about humans being primitive and emotional and weak, and she realized that perhaps weakness and strength had been defined wrong her entire life. "There is something I need to see first," she said. Thane raised an eyebrow but reached for a data tablet. "What do you need?" "Access to Valorant communication networks. Public channels." He handed her the tablet without argument. The interface was clumsy to her fingers, human design rather than Valorant, but functional. She navigated to the official House Talon announcements. The first entry hit her like a physical blow. House Talon mourns the loss of beloved daughter. It is with profound grief that House Talon announces the tragic death of Zafira Talon, beloved daughter and devoted member of our family. Zafira perished in a shuttle accident 3 days ago while returning from diplomatic duties. She was 28 years old. A formal remembrance ceremony will be held at the family hall. In her memory, House Talon renews its commitment to service and honor. The words blurred. She scrolled down, found images, her father standing before assembled press, his expression grave, the perfect picture of grief, speaking about his daughter's dedication, her intelligence, her promise, her mother beside him, eyes red. Had she been crying? Or were those just the effects of careful makeup, her brother standing behind? Solemn, respectful, all of them lying. She had been dead to them for 3 days. While she had been dying in the desert, they had been orchestrating her funeral. While Thane had been carrying her to safety, her family had been accepting condolences and speaking of her in past tense. She scrolled further, found the announcement she had been dreading. House Talon and House Drell strengthen alliance. In honor of the late Zafira Talon's dedication to family duty, House Talon is pleased to announce the betrothal of Mira Talon to Lord Kavros of House Drell. The union will proceed as originally planned, ensuring the strength of both houses and the continuation of vital political alliances. Her cousin, Mira, 17 years old, shy, quiet, dreamed of becoming a scholar, now to be traded to Lord Kavros instead. The machinery of political alliance continuing without pause. One daughter dead, another immediately substituted, interchangeable parts in a system that valued power over people. Zafira set the tablet down carefully. Her hands were shaking. "I am dead," she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. Officially, publicly, completely. Thane watched her, waiting, letting her process. "My father gave a eulogy, called me devoted, honored my memory, all while knowing exactly what he had done to me." "I'm sorry," Thane said simply. The words were genuine. "You deserve better." She looked at him, this human, this stranger, this man who had saved her life because it was the right thing to do. "Why did you really come?" she asked. "The truth. You spoke of your sister, but there must be more. You violated protocol, left your patrol route, walked into potential danger. For what?" "For someone you do not know." Thane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something long considered. "Because the universe is full of people who will tell you why something can't be done, why it's too risky, why it's not their problem, why someone else should handle it. And most of the time, they're probably right. But then there are moments where someone needs help, and you're the only one close enough to provide it. And in those moments, all the logical reasons not to act feel hollow. Because at the end of the day, I have to live with myself. And I can live with a lot of things, but I can't live with knowing I heard someone calling for help and chose to walk away." He stood, moved to a storage locker, retrieved emergency rations and clothing. "The question now is, what do you want to do? Your family thinks you're dead. The Valorant Empire thinks you're dead. You have no house, no rank, no place in your old world. But you have your life. That's something. That's the starting point. Where you go from here is your choice." Your choice. The words hung in the air like something sacred. Zafira had lived 28 years without truly understanding what they meant. Every decision had been made for her education, Her training, her duties, her marriage, even her death had been decided by others. But Thane was offering something different, something terrifying and liberating in equal measure, the freedom to choose. She thought about valor in space, the empire that had raised her, the culture that had taught her duty and honor and sacrifice, the system that had concluded she was expendable when she became inconvenient. She thought about this ship, small and battered and functional, about Thane, cared and determined and guided by principles that valued individual lives over political expediency. She thought about the tracking implant in her back, about the fact that her family would know if she traveled to Terran space, about what that might mean. Assassins, diplomatic incidents, complications. She thought about her cousin Mira, 17 and being traded to Lord Kavros because Zafira had refused. She thought about what would happen if she returned, begged forgiveness, accepted her place, lived the life that had been planned for her. She thought about Thane's sister, Bryn, 19 and trying to escape, dying because she had stayed too long, because help had not come in time. The decision crystallized. I want asylum, she said, in Terran space. I want to request protection under your laws. And I want to learn what it means to make my own choices, to live as more than a political asset. Thane nodded slowly, no surprise in his expression, as if he had known all along what she would choose. All right, fair warning, it won't be easy. There will be a hearing. Questions. Your family and the Valoran Empire will likely contest it. You'll have to testify. Tell your story. Publicly. There are no guarantees. I understand. And once we leave Korath Prime, there's no going back. This decision is permanent. I know. He studied her face, searching for doubt, finding only determination. Okay then, let's get you to safety. He moved to the cockpit, ship systems hummed to life, engines warming, navigation plotting course. Zafira remained on the medical table, feeling the vibrations through the deck plating. This ship would take her away from everything she had ever known, every certainty, every identity, every expectation. The tracking implant in her back transmitted her location to House Talon. They would know she was alive. They would know she was traveling to human space. They would know she had chosen this. Let them know. She had been left to die in a desert. She had been saved by a stranger. She had seen her own obituary written by the people who had killed her. She had been mourned by the family that had caused her death. And now she was choosing to live. The ship lifted off. The crimson desert fell away beneath them. The twin suns of Korath Prime faded to points of light as they broke atmosphere. Ahead lay the darkness of space, and beyond that Terran territory. Questions, hearings, uncertainty, but also possibility. Thane glanced back from the cockpit. You all right? Zafira looked at her reflection in the medical bay's polished surfaces. Her face was bruised but healing. Her body was damaged but recovering. Her old life was dead, but she was alive. Yes, she said, and mended. I am all right. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. The stars stretched and blurred, and Zafira of House Talon, officially deceased, began the journey toward becoming something she had never been permitted to be before. Herself. The first day in faster-than-light travel felt like existing between heartbeats. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously. The ship's windows showed nothing but the blue-white shimmer of the warp field. No stars, no reference points, just the endless rush of velocity that human technology had somehow tamed into controlled transit. Zafira stood in the small observation alcove, watching the nothing that was somehow movement. Her reflection stared back from the transparent aluminum. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow-green shadows. The medical nanites had done their work efficiently. Physically, she was healing. But the woman looking back at her was a stranger. This was the face of someone officially dead. Behind her, she heard Thane moving through the ship's narrow corridor. He had given her the small sleeping quarters, taking the emergency cot in the cargo bay for himself. She had protested. He had simply said that she needed rest more than he did and closed the discussion with a kind of quiet authority that made argument feel petty. She turned from the window, found him in the galley preparing food. The smells were unfamiliar. Human cuisine. Nothing like the carefully cultivated dishes of House Talon's kitchens. Protein bars and reconstituted vegetables, Thane said without looking up. Not exactly gourmet, but it's nutritious. You need to rebuild your strength. Zafira accepted the plate, sat at the small table, took a cautious bite. The texture was strange, the flavor was bland, but it was food, and she was alive to eat it. In Valoran culture, she said slowly, meals are structured events. Each course has meaning. The order represents hierarchy. The eldest eats first, then by rank. Conversation follows specific patterns. Sounds exhausting, Thane said. He sat across from her with his own plate, started eating immediately. No ceremony, no ritual, just fuel for the body. It is. The admission surprised her. She had never questioned the meal protocols before. They simply were, like gravity or breathing. But it is also safe. Everyone knows their place, their role. There is comfort in structure. There's also prison in structure, when the rules matter more than the people following them. Zafira ate in silence for a moment, processing. The food tasted better on the second bite, or perhaps she was simply too hungry to care. Teach me, she said suddenly. Thane raised an eyebrow. Teach you what? How to make choices without the weight of expectations. Teach me what you meant when you said I could choose who to become. Thane set down his fork, studied her with those storm-gray eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who understood that this was not a casual request. Freedom is harder than you think. Most people want it in theory, but when faced with actual choice with real consequences, they freeze, because structure is easier. Someone else making the decisions means someone else carries the responsibility. I know, Zafira met his gaze, but I also know that I was left to boss because I tried to make one choice for myself. If that is the cost of structure, I will pay the price of freedom instead. Thane nodded slowly. All right, lesson 1, start small. What do you want to do after we finish eating? The question seemed trivial, but Zafira felt her mind immediately reaching for protocol. In House Talon after meals came specific duties: study, training, social obligations. A Valoran Noble's Day was planned in 15-minute increments from waking to sleep. I do not know, she admitted. That's okay, that's step 1. Recognizing that you have options. You could rest. You could explore the ship. You could read. You could ask me questions. You could sit and stare at the wall if that appeals to you. None of these choices are wrong, they're just choices. But some must be better than others, more productive, more appropriate. According to whose standards, if you choose to rest, you're helping your body heal. If you explore the ship, you're learning your environment. If you read, you're expanding knowledge. If you ask questions, you're building understanding. If you stare at the wall, maybe you're processing trauma and need that time. All of these have value. The question is, what do you need right now? Not what you should do. What do you want? Zafira felt something crack inside her chest. The weight of 28 years of should, of must, of expectations and obligations, and the constant pressure to be what House Talon required, rather than what she was. I want to understand, she said quietly. I want to know how your people built a civilization that values individual choice. I want to know how you prevent chaos, how you maintain order without crushing people who don't fit the mold. Thane leaned back, considered. We don't prevent chaos, not completely. Human society is messy, loud, full of disagreement and conflict, and people making terrible decisions. We've had wars, still have them. We've oppressed each other, still do in some places. We're far from perfect. Then how? But we try. We've built systems based on the idea that every person has inherent worth, not because of who their parents were or what house they belong to, just because they exist. We call them rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And we've spent centuries fighting over what those words mean, how to protect them, how to balance individual freedom with collective good. He paused, took a drink of water. The key difference is that we start from the assumption that people should be free to choose their own path, and then we build systems to protect that freedom. Valoran seemed to start from the assumption that order requires control, and then they build systems to enforce that control. Both civilizations function, but one of them would have let you choose who to marry. The words settled between them, heavy with implication. Zafira had been taught that Valoran civilization was superior, more advanced, more refined. The humans were newcomers, children playing at galactic politics. But sitting in this small ship eating bland food with a man who had risked his life for a stranger, she wondered if advancement had been measured by the wrong metrics all along. "How long is the journey to the Terran outpost?" she asked. "4 days total. We're about 6 hours in." 4 days, it seemed both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. 4 days to learn how to be a person rather than a political asset. 4 days before facing a hearing that would determine whether she could stay in human space or be returned to the empire that had tried to kill her. "Tell me about your world," she said. "Earth, what is it like?" Thane's expression softened, something like nostalgia crossing his features. "Beautiful. Complicated. We've got oceans that cover 70% of the surface, mountains that pierce the clouds, deserts that make Korath Prime look mild, forests so dense you can walk for days without seeing the sky, and cities. God, the cities. Billions of people all living on top of each other, somehow making it work. It sounds chaotic. It is. It's also home. Do you miss it?" "Every day, but this is where I'm needed, out here, patrolling the edges, answering distress calls." He smiled slightly. "Rescuing stubborn, Valorant nobles from deserts." The joke was gentle. Zafira found herself almost smiling back. The expression felt strange on her face. House Talon had not encouraged smiling. It suggested frivolity, lack of seriousness. They finished eating. Zafira helped clean up, learning the ship's water reclamation system. Everything was efficient, nothing wasted. A small civilization compressed into metal and circuitry. She spent the rest of that day exploring. The ship was modest. Cockpit, living quarters, small cargo bay, medical bay, engine room, everything within 30 meters of corridor. But within that space was everything needed for survival, for purpose, for life. Thane gave her access to the ship's library. Thousands of texts, human history, philosophy, art. She read about democracies and republics, about revolutions fought for freedom, about the messy, violent, beautiful process of humans trying to figure out how to live together without crushing individual will. The second day brought deeper conversations. Thane taught her about human concepts of justice, of rehabilitation rather than punishment, of the belief that people could change, could grow, could become more than their worst moments. In Valoran law, Zafira said, status determines consequences. A noble who commits a crime faces house sanctions, loss of rank, political fallout. A commoner who commits the same crime faces imprisonment or execution. The logic is that nobles have more to lose, more responsibility, therefore more accountability. "The logic is broken," Thane said bluntly. "What you're describing isn't accountability, it's privilege. Nobles get away with things commoners can't because their consequences are internal to their own power structure." "Yes," Zafira said, and felt something shift in her understanding. She had known this, had seen it, but had never questioned it because questioning the foundation of Valoran society felt like questioning reality itself. But reality was already broken. Her family had proven that. The third day brought restlessness. Zafira felt the walls of the ship closing in. The blue-white shimmer of FTL travel began to feel less like motion and more like stagnation. She was between worlds, between identities, between past and future, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Thane found her in the observation alcove again, staring at nothing. "Want to talk about it?" he asked. "The hearing," she said, "at the outpost. What will it be like formal?" "There will be a Terran Council representative, probably someone from the Valoran embassy. You'll have to testify, tell your story. They'll ask questions, verify facts. It's not a trial, you haven't committed a crime, but it's also not automatic approval. They have to balance your right to asylum against diplomatic relations with the Valoran Empire. And if they deny my request," Thane was quiet for a moment, "then they'll return you to Valoran space, to your family's custody, which means my death." Yes, the word hung between them, simple, undeniable. If the hearing failed, she would be sent back to the people who had left her to die. They would not make the same mistake twice. No desert, no distress beacon, just a quiet disappearance. An accident. Another tragic loss for House Talon to mourn publicly while celebrating privately. I need to know the truth, Zafira said. What are my actual chances? Not what you hope, what the data shows. Thane hesitated. She saw the conflict in his expression, the desire to protect her from harsh reality warring with the respect of giving her honest information. Show me, she said firmly. If I am to choose my own path, I need to see the obstacles clearly. He pulled up a data tablet, navigated to files, turned it toward her. Asylum cases, Terran Defense Force records, hundreds of entries. Zafira scanned through them. Her trained mind, educated in Valoran diplomatic analysis, processed the information quickly. The pattern emerged within minutes. Asylum approval rate for Valoran citizens, 15.3%. The successful cases had commonalities. Advanced technical knowledge, military intelligence, strategic value to Terran interests. They were defectors who brought leverage, information, something tangible beyond their personal circumstances. The failed cases were the ones like hers, people fleeing abuse, oppression, personal conflicts with powerful families. Their stories were tragic. Their circumstances were genuine, but they had nothing to offer except their testimony. And testimony alone was rarely enough when weighed against the political cost of angering Valoran houses. 15%, she said softly. Yes. I have no military secrets, no technical knowledge worth trading, no intelligence to offer, just my story. Sometimes truth is enough, but usually it is not, according to this data. Thane took the tablet back. Numbers don't tell the whole story. Each case is unique. Circumstances matter. The composition of the council matters. The political climate matters. You have factors in your favor. Your injuries were documented. The tracking implant. These aren't just claims, they're facts. Facts that my family will dispute. They will say I am mentally unstable, that I harmed myself, that I invented everything to justify my defection. There are already records. She pulled up the tablet again, showed him what she had found during her research. Medical files from her childhood, psychological evaluations, a pattern carefully constructed over years, notations about emotional instability, irrational behavior, difficulty accepting authority. They have been building a case against me, she said. Her voice remained steady despite the rage burning in her chest. This was not impulsive. My father planned for the possibility that I would refuse the marriage, that I would try to leave. He created documentation that paints me as unstable, unreliable, someone whose testimony cannot be trusted. Thane stared at the files. His jaw tightened. When he spoke, his voice was cold, controlled fury. This is systematic, premeditated. Yes, my father is nothing if not thorough. He did not become head of House Talon through mercy or sentiment. He built his power through careful planning and ruthless execution. Then we counter it. We show the truth. The medical scans from my ship are independent, time-stamped. They show injuries consistent with your account. The tracking implant is physical evidence. We present facts against their constructed narrative. It will not be enough. Zafira felt the weight of reality settling. You said yourself, 15%. The truth is rarely enough when power wants a different story. Thane was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised her. You're probably right. She looked at him sharply. Statistically, he continued, you're facing an uphill battle. The odds are against you. The Valoran Empire has power and influence that will weigh on the Council's decision. And yes, your father has constructed a compelling counter-narrative. All of that is true. He met her eyes. But here's what else is true. You survived when you should have died. You chose freedom when it would have been easier to accept your fate. You're sitting here right now preparing to fight for yourself despite knowing the odds. That matters. Not because it changes the statistics, but because it changes you. How does that help me in the hearing? Because testimony isn't just about facts. It's about who delivers those facts, how they stand, how they speak, whether they believe in their own story. The council will see your father's argument, but they'll also see you. And if you stand there with the conviction of someone who has chosen their path consciously despite the cost that has power, more power than you think. Zafira wanted to believe him, but belief felt dangerous. Hope felt like weakness. Better to see reality clearly, to prepare for failure, to protect herself against the disappointment. Except that was exactly how House Talon thought. Protection through emotional distance, safety through controlled expectations. The very mindset that had made it possible for her father to order her death without visible regret. If she was truly choosing a different path, she had to choose differently in all ways, including the choice to hope even when hope seemed foolish. Teach me, she said. Teach me how to stand before them, how to speak, how to make them see me as a person rather than a political problem. Thane nodded. We've got one more day. Let's use it. They spent the third evening in preparation. Thane asked her questions, hard questions, personal questions, made her tell her story repeatedly until the words came easily. Not rehearsed, natural. The truth spoken with the confidence of someone who had lived it. They will ask about your family, he said, about why you refused the marriage. They'll want to know if you're just spoiled, entitled, a rich girl having a tantrum. I was trying to have autonomy, not a tantrum. I know that. You know that. Make them know it. Explain what marriage means in Valorant culture. Not just for you, for all women. Make them understand the system you were refusing. She practiced, stumbled, tried again. Learned to separate emotion from fact. To speak about trauma without being consumed by it. To present her case not as a victim seeking rescue, but as a person claiming the right to self-determination. Thane was a patient teacher. He corrected her when she slipped into Valorant formal speech patterns, stopped her when she became too clinical, pushed her when she tried to minimize the abuse. Own your story, he said. Don't apologize for it. Don't soften it. What happened to you was wrong. Say it like it's wrong, not because you're angry, but because you know the difference between right and wrong, and you're choosing right. The fourth day brought them out of FTL travel. The ship's systems adjusted. The stars reappeared. Ahead, barely visible yet, was the Terran outpost, a small station orbiting a dead moon, home to perhaps 300 humans, military personnel, support staff, scientists studying the region's stellar phenomena. It was the closest thing to civilization in this sector. It was also where Zafira's future would be decided. We'll arrive in about 6 hours, Thane said. I need to send notification ahead. Let the council know we're coming. Officially request the asylum hearing. Do it, Zafira said. He moved to the communications panel, began composing the message. Zafira stood in the observation alcove watching the stars, trying to calm her mind. A proximity alert chimed. Thane's head snapped up. We've got a contact. Ship just dropped out of FTL, 200,000 kilometers. Terran space, so probably friendly, but... He trailed off. The sensor data was refining. Ship configuration, energy signature, identification protocols. Valorant, he said quietly. Patrol vessel, Imperial markings. Zafira felt her blood turn cold. They are here for me. We don't know that. This sector sees Valorant patrols regularly. Could be coincidence. But the way he said it made clear he did not believe in coincidence any more than she did. The communication system crackled to life. A voice, female, speaking standard with a Valorant accent. Terran vessel, this is Valoran patrol ship Crimson Wing. We have detected your presence. Please identify yourself and state your purpose in this sector. Thane moved to respond. Zafira stopped him with a hand on his arm. They will scan your ship. They will detect a Valoran biosignature. They will ask questions. I can handle questions. They will ask to see me, to verify my well-being. Protocol requires it when a Valoran citizen is found with non-Valorans. She knew the regulations, had studied them as part of her diplomatic training. If I refuse to show myself, they will become suspicious. If I do show myself, they will scan my identity, and they will discover I am supposed to be dead. The implications hung between them. The Crimson Wing would report back to Valoran Command. Word would reach her family within hours. They would know she had survived. They would know she was traveling with a human. They would know she was heading toward a Terran outpost, and they would respond accordingly. What do you want to do? Thane asked. The question again. What do you want? Zafira looked at the sensor data. The Crimson Wing was maintaining distance, not approaching aggressively. They were following protocol. Professional. If she identified herself, explained that she was traveling voluntarily with Captain Aldrich, they would likely accept it. File a report. Move on. She could return to Valor in space right now, board that patrol ship, claim there had been a mistake, a misunderstanding, beg her father's forgiveness, accept the marriage to Lord Kavros, live the life that had been planned for her. The tracking implant in her back would confirm her identity immediately. House Talon would be notified. Her father would have to publicly acknowledge her survival. It would be complicated, embarrassing, but survivable. She could claim memory loss from the crash, confusion, gratitude to the human who had helped her. The door was still open. This choice could still be unmade. She thought about Thane's sister, Bryn, 19 and trying to escape, staying too long, dying because she had hesitated when she should have run. She thought about her cousin Mira, 17 and being prepared for marriage to Lord Kavros, young and powerless and about to be traded like property. She thought about the 15% success rate, the overwhelming likelihood that the hearing would fail, that she would be returned to her family anyway. All of this suffering for nothing. But she also thought about the 3 days in this ship, learning to make small choices, learning that she could want things for herself, learning that freedom was hard and messy and terrifying and worth it. Do not respond, she said. Thane stared at her. If we don't respond, they'll consider it suspicious. They might pursue, force an interaction. I know, but if we respond, I will have to show myself or lie about who I am. Either option compromises everything. This way we stay unidentified, just another human vessel. They will file a report about an unresponsive ship, but they will not connect it to me. Not yet. You're choosing this knowing it might make things harder. I am choosing this. Thane held her gaze for a long moment. Then he killed the communication response. The ship went silent. The Crimson Wing hailed them twice more. Each time, Thane let it pass without answer. The patrol ship maintained position for another 30 minutes. Then, presumably, deciding that a non-responsive human vessel was not worth the diplomatic incident, it jumped back to FTL. The sensor screen showed empty space again. Zafira realized she had been holding her breath. She released it slowly. That was the moment, she said. That was the point where I could have turned back. Yes. I did not. No, you didn't. She turned to face him fully. I am choosing this path, consciously, with full understanding of the risks. Whatever happens at the hearing, whatever the council decides, I will have made this choice. Buime, that matters. Thane smiled, actually smiled, pride in his expression. It does, more than you know. They continued toward the outpost. The final hours passed in relative silence. Zafira spent the time reviewing her testimony, preparing herself mentally, understanding that she was about to face the most important challenge of her life. 1 hour from docking, the ship's communication system pinged. Incoming message. Thane frowned at the source tag. It's addressed to you. Personal encryption. Valorant protocols. How is that possible? We've been radio silent. Zafira felt dread pool in her stomach. My family. They must have monitored the tracking implant, sent this to whatever ship I was on. It would have been queued in the system, waiting for the next communication window. Do you want to read it? She almost said no, almost deleted it without looking. But that would be avoidance, and she was done avoiding difficult truths. She opened the message. The text was short, written in high Valorant script, the formal language of nobility, but the words themselves were anything but formal. Zafira, I do not know if this message will reach you. I do not know if you are alive. Father says you are dead. Mother cries but says nothing. KL and Dren do not speak of what happened, but I heard them that night. I heard them planning. I heard Father give the order. I am 14 years old. In 4 years, I will be eligible for marriage contracts. Father has already received inquiries, already begun negotiations. I think I will be sold like you were, traded for alliance or technology or whatever House Talon needs. I am not brave like you. I will not refuse when the time comes. But I wanted you to know, if you are alive somewhere, that someone here loves you. Someone believes you were right to choose yourself. Do not come back. There is nothing here for you but death. But live Zeph, live free, live for both of us, your sister Nixa. The words blurred. Zafira read them twice, 3 times. Felt something crack open in her chest that she had been holding closed since seeing her own obituary. Her entire family had not betrayed her. Nixa was 14, still young enough to see clearly, still young enough to question, still young enough to love without the cold calculation that had consumed the rest of House Talon. And she was warning Zafira to stay away, to save herself, because in 4 years, Nixa would face the same choice. And she had already decided she was not brave enough to refuse. Zafira felt tears on her face, hot and immediate. She had not cried when her brothers beat her, had not cried waking in the desert, had barely cried reading her own death notice. But this message from her little sister, this small expression of love from someone still trapped in the system she had escaped, broke her completely. Thane found her on the floor of the observation alcove, knees drawn up, face buried in her hands, sobbing with the kind of grief that came from understanding exactly what she had lost and what she had gained, and the impossible choice that had forced her to lose anything at all. He sat beside her, said nothing, simply present. Eventually the tears stopped. Zafira wiped her face, took shaking breaths, forced herself back to steadiness. "My sister," she said. Her voice was rough. "Nixa, she is 14. She sent me a message. She knows what happened. She told me not to come back. She told me to live free." "That's good. You have someone who understands. Someone who supports your choice. She is going to face the same thing I did. In 4 years, Father is already negotiating marriage contracts for her. And she said she will not be brave enough to refuse." The weight of it settled. Zafira had escaped, but she had not changed the system. Her freedom came at the cost of leaving Nixa behind, leaving all the other daughters behind, all the women who would continue to be traded and sold and valued only for their political connections. "You cannot save everyone," Thane said gently. "Not yet. Right now, you need to save yourself, get asylum, build a life, become strong, and maybe someday you can be the example that gives your sister and others like her the courage to make different choices. Maybe is not enough. Maybe is all any of us get. We do what we can, help who we can, and trust that it creates ripples, that it matters." Zafira thought about the message, about Nixa risking Father's wrath to send it, about a 14-year-old girl finding the courage to express love when everyone else had chosen politics. If Nixa could be that brave while still trapped, Zafira could be brave enough to fight for her freedom in front of the council. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for answering my distress call, for carrying me out of that desert, for teaching me about choice, for believing I deserve freedom even when the odds say otherwise." "You do deserve it," Thane said simply. "That's not up for debate." The outpost appeared in the forward view screen, small but solid, a place of safety, or the place where her last chance would be decided. Zafira stood, straightened her clothing. The outfit Thane had given her was simple, human style, practical rather than elegant, nothing like the ornate garments of Valoran nobility. She looked like what she was, someone between worlds, between identities. But she was done being between, done waiting for others to decide who she would be. Tomorrow she would stand before the council. She would tell her story. She would fight for asylum. And regardless of the outcome, she would do it as someone who had chosen her path consciously. She was Zafira of House Talon, officially dead, unofficially alive, and she was ready to fight for the right to stay that way. The ship began docking procedures. The outpost grew larger in the view screen. Thane moved through final approach protocols. Zafira stood in the observation alcove, watching their destination approach and feeling the weight of everything that was about to happen, but also feeling something else. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, irrational hope. The kind that made humans risk themselves for strangers. The kind that made girls refuse arranged marriages. The kind that made 14-year-olds send secret messages to dead sisters. Hope that maybe, just maybe, truth would be enough. The ship docked, the airlock sealed, and Zafira stepped forward to face her future, whatever it held. The hearing chamber was smaller than Zafira had imagined. 3 walls of brushed metal, the 4th transparent aluminum overlooking the starfield beyond the station. A simple table and chairs, recording equipment, nothing ceremonial, nothing that suggested the weight of the decision being made here. This was where her future would be determined. Commander Sarah Voss sat at the center of the Terran Council panel, late 50s, silver hair pulled back severely. Her uniform bore the marks of 30 years' service. Two other council members flanked her, a younger man with tactical insignia, an older woman whose civilian dress suggested diplomatic corps. All three faces were neutral, professional, giving nothing away. Across from the panel at a separate table sat the Valoran representative, Ambassador Kelric Shan, not her father. That had been too much to hope for. But Shan was worse in some ways. He was old guard, conservative, a true believer in Valoran hierarchy and traditions. His ice blue skin seemed to glow in the chamber's lighting. His silver markings traced patterns that spoke of ancient lineage. He looked at Zafira the way one might look at a malfunctioning piece of equipment, something that needed to be returned to the manufacturer for correction. Thane sat in the observation area, technically a witness, actually her only support in the room. She had told him he did not need to attend. He had simply shown up anyway, present without being intrusive, support without smothering. Commander Voss activated the recording system. This hearing will determine the asylum request of Zafira of House Talon Valoran Empire. The applicant claims political persecution and seeks protection under Terran law. Ambassador Shan represents the interests of the Valoran Empire. Captain Thane Aldrich will serve as witness to events. She turned to Zafira. Miss Talon, you may present your case. Zafira stood. She had practiced this, prepared. But standing here facing these strangers who held her life in their hands, the words felt inadequate. How did you summarize 28 years of conditioning and betrayal and choice into coherent testimony? You started with truth. My name is Zafira. I am the third daughter of Lord Kaelin Talon, head of House Talon in the Valoran Empire. 4 days ago, my family left me to die in the desert of Karath Prime because I refused an arranged marriage. The words landed in the silent chamber. Simple, direct, the foundation upon which everything else would build. In Valoran culture, she continued, marriage is not personal choice. It is political strategy. Noble daughters are traded to forge alliances, to consolidate power, to advance family interests. We are raised to accept this, to understand that our duty to house supersedes our individual desires. Commander Voss made notes. The tactical officer watched without expression. The diplomat leaned forward slightly. I was informed 3 months ago that I would marry Lord Kavros of House Drell, a man I had met twice, a man 40 years my senior, a man whose reputation for cruelty toward his previous wives is well documented, but carefully ignored because his house controls significant military resources. Objection. Ambassador Shan's voice was cool, precise. The applicant is making unsubstantiated claims about a respected Valoran lord. This is character assassination, not testimony. Commander Voss glanced at him. Noted. Continue, Miss Talon. Please focus on your own experiences rather than hearsay. Zafira nodded, adjusted. This would be the pattern. Every claim challenged, every statement questioned. I refused the marriage. I explained to my father that I could not bind myself to someone I could not respect. I proposed alternative alliances, other strategies. I asked for time to find a solution that would benefit House Talon without requiring my marriage. And your father's response? He said I shamed the family, that my refusal dishonored 3 centuries of tradition. That evening, my brothers came to my quarters. They beat me unconscious. When I woke, I was being transported to Korath Prime. They left me in the desert with a fractured leg, internal trauma, and severe dehydration. They placed a distress beacon on my body. Not to save me, to document my death. They wanted proof for whoever came looking. She saw Shan making notes, preparing his counter. She continued before he could interrupt. Captain Aldrich answered the distress call. He carried me 3 kilometers through hostile terrain to his ship. He provided medical treatment that saved my life. During the journey to this outpost, I learned that my family had announced my death. A public funeral was held. I am officially deceased, and my cousin, 17 years old, was immediately betrothed to Lord Kavros in my place. Well, this testimony is dramatic. Ambassador Shan said, his tone suggesting the opposite of the compliment the words might imply. but it presents only one perspective. The applicant claims abuse. The applicant claims abandonment. Yet she provides no context for these alleged actions, no acknowledgement of her own behavior that precipitated these consequences. Commander Voss turned to him. "You'll have opportunity to present your evidence, Ambassador. For now, let the applicant finish." But the damage was done. The suggestion planted that somehow Zafira's behavior had justified what happened, that she bore responsibility for her own attempted murder. She forced herself to continue. "I understand that my request creates diplomatic complications, that the Valoran Empire is powerful, that maintaining good relations matters. But I also understand that Terran society claims to value individual rights, the right to choose one's own path, to determine one's own future. I am asking for that right, for asylum, for the chance to build a life based on my own choices rather than my family's political needs." She sat down. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, waited. Commander Voss looked to the tactical officer. He tapped his data pad, pulled up files. Captain Aldrich's report corroborates the basic facts. Medical scans show injuries consistent with assault. The tracking implant is confirmed. Timestamps align. The public death announcement from House Talon is verified. On the surface, the testimony seems credible. "On the surface," Ambassador Sean said smoothly. He rose, activated his own data display. "However, the Terran Council should have complete context before making such a significant decision. May I present evidence from House Talon?" Commander Voss gestured permission. What appeared on the screen made Zafira's blood run cold. Medical records, dating back 10 years, psychological evaluations, notes from family physicians, all carefully documenting a pattern: emotional instability, irrational behavior, difficulty accepting authority, episodes of self-harm. "As you can see," Sean said, his voice carrying false sympathy, "House Talon has been concerned about Zafira's mental health for years. These are not recent fabrications. These are legitimate medical documents showing a pattern of psychological issues." Zafira stared at the records. Some of them she recognized. Appointments she had attended, evaluations she had undergone as part of standard noble training. But the notes were different. Words twisted, symptoms invented. Normal adolescent frustration reframed as pathology. "Note this entry from age 19, Sean continued. Subject shows persistent defiance of household protocols. Requires repeated correction. Exhibits fantasy thinking about alternative life paths. Recommend continued supervision." He moved to another file. Age 23. Subject demonstrates increasing disconnect from reality regarding her role in family structure. Suggests she should have say in her own marriage arrangements. Shows signs of delusion about personal autonomy. The words were clinical, professional, delivered with the authority of medical expertise, and they painted a picture of someone unstable, unreliable, someone whose testimony could not be trusted because her grasp on reality itself was questionable. Zafira felt the floor dropping away beneath her. This was not improvised. This was systematic. Years of careful documentation building toward this exact moment. Her father had known, had planned, had predicted that someday she might try to leave. And he had constructed the perfect trap. If she defended herself too vigorously, she appeared irrational, confirming the diagnosis. If she accepted the characterization, she undermined her own testimony. Either path led to the same conclusion: that she was not credible, that her claims were the fantasies of a disturbed mind. "The family's position," Sean said, "is that Zafira requires treatment, not asylum. House Talon is willing to ensure she receives appropriate psychological care. They ask only that she be returned to Valoran custody where she can be properly helped." Helped. The word was poison wrapped in concern. Commander Voss studied the documents. "These are compelling. Captain Aldrich, you spent several days with Miss Talon. Did you observe any signs of the instability described here?" Thane stood, moved to the witness position. When he spoke, his voice was steady. "No, Commander. What I observed was someone who had experienced severe trauma and was processing it rationally. Someone who asked intelligent questions, who learned quickly, who made reasoned decisions about her future. But you're not a psychologist, the tactical officer pointed out. No, I'm a soldier who's seen trauma, combat stress, PTSD, the real thing. And what Miss Talon displayed was nothing like pathology. It was clarity. Someone who had survived an assassination attempt and was dealing with the aftermath in remarkably healthy ways. With respect, Captain Sean said, you rescued Miss Talon. You have emotional investment in believing she's mentally sound, that she's the victim you want her to be. But these medical records suggest a different story, one where a troubled young woman manufactured a crisis to justify running away from responsibilities she found uncomfortable. The accusation hung in the air, manufactured, as if the fractured bones had been self-inflicted, as if the assassination attempt was imagined. Thane's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Zafira stood. May I speak? Commander Voss nodded. Zafira looked at the medical records, at Ambassador Sean, at the council members who would decide her fate, and she made a choice, not to defend, not to explain, but to claim her truth with absolute conviction. Those records are real, she said. I do not dispute their authenticity. They are expertly constructed, years of careful documentation. My father is nothing if not thorough. Sean's expression flickered. Surprise. He had expected denial, defensiveness, not agreement. What those records do not show, Zafira continued, is context. Yes, I question household protocols, because some of those protocols involve treating servants as property. Yes, I fantasized about alternative life paths, because the path laid out for me was marriage to a man known for abusing his wives. Yes, I demonstrated disconnect from my assigned role, because that role required I accept that my worth was measured solely by political utility. She moved closer to the council table, not aggressive, simply present, refusing to be diminished. Ambassador Sean says I manufactured a crisis. Commander, I invite you to examine the medical scans Captain Aldrich provided. Examine the pattern of fractures, the internal trauma, the dehydration timeline. Ask any trauma physician if those injuries are consistent with self-harm or consistent with systematic beating by multiple attackers. Commander Voss pulled up Thane's medical files, compared them against the psychological records. Her expression remained neutral, but Zafira saw the slight tightening around her eyes. Recognition. The tracking implant, Zafira pressed. It was active, broadcasting my location. Ambassador Sean's explanation is that House Talon wanted to ensure I was safe, but safe from what I was the one in danger. The implant was not for my protection. It was to confirm I had died where they left me. Speculation, Sean said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Is it? Then explain why my family held my funeral before confirming my death. Explain why they immediately betrothed my cousin to Lord Kavros. Explain why my father refused to attend this hearing. If I am truly disturbed and in need of help, why is he not here? Why send a proxy? The question hung unanswered. Zafira turned to face Sean directly. You say I need treatment. You say I should return to Valorant custody. You say this with the authority of medical documentation and the weight of political influence. But I am standing here now speaking clearly and rationally. I am not irrational for wanting autonomy. I am not delusional for believing I deserve to choose my own path. I am not disturbed for refusing to accept being traded like currency. Her voice strengthened. What I am is a woman who refused to be a tool of political strategy. And for that crime, my family tried to kill me. These medical records are not evidence of instability. They are evidence of a system that pathologizes resistance. That defines anyone who questions authority as mentally ill. That builds cases against their own children in preparation for the day those children might choose freedom over obedience. The silence in the chamber was absolute. If the council returns me to Valoran custody, Zafira said quietly, I will die. Perhaps not immediately. Perhaps not in a way that looks like violence. But my father will ensure I never have another opportunity to embarrass the family. And these medical records will provide perfect justification for whatever method he chooses. She was unstable. We tried to help her. Tragic, really. She looked at each council member in turn. Captain Aldrich told me about Terran values. individual rights, personal freedom, the belief that every person has inherent worth not determined by birth or social status. I am asking you to prove those are more than words. I am asking you to choose a person's life over political convenience. I am asking you to see me not as a diplomatic problem, but as someone fighting for the most basic right any being should have, the right to exist as myself. She sat down, trembling, not from fear, from the absolute exhaustion of exposing herself so completely, of stripping away every defense and standing naked before judgment. Commander Voss turned to her fellow council members. The tactical officer leaned in, whispered something. The diplomatic officer's expression was troubled. She shook her head slightly. Another quiet exchange. We need to deliberate, Voss said. This hearing is recessed for 1 hour. The council members stood, filed toward the side chamber, but as they reached the door, the diplomatic officer turned back. Commander, I must voice my concerns on record before we deliberate. Voss paused. Proceed. The political cost of granting asylum could be severe. Trade agreements with the Valoran Empire, military cooperation, scientific exchange, all at risk. She looked at Zafira. I'm not unsympathetic to Miss Talon's situation, but we must consider broader implications. One life against potential breakdown of diplomatic relations. One life against our principles, Thane said from the witness area. If we return her, we're admitting those principles are negotiable, that they apply only when convenient. Ambassador Shan smiled coldly. Principles are luxury of the powerful captain. The Valoran Empire will not tolerate this precedent. Return Zafira now and relations continue. Grant asylum and there will be consequences, immediate and severe. The threat hung explicit in the air. Zafira felt the walls closing in. She had presented her case, defended herself. But in the end, it came down to mathematics. Her life versus economic partnerships. Her freedom versus political stability. The calculation was simple, cold, logical. She stood. Then let me make this easier, she heard herself say. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere that had learned from Thane's example. If my asylum costs too much, I will return voluntarily. Not because I accept my family's judgment, but because I will not let fear of consequences make others compromise what they believe. Captain Aldrich taught me that doing right matters more than doing easy, even when the right choice is walking back into danger. The room went silent. Thane stood. Zafira, you don't have to. Yes, I do, because if the council grants me asylum out of pity rather than principle, then I haven't really won. I've just traded one form of obligation for another. Commander Voss studied her. Something shifted in the older woman's expression. Not pity, recognition. That won't be necessary, Voss said firmly. She turned to the diplomatic officer. Your concerns are noted. Tactical officer, your assessment. The younger man straightened. The medical evidence supports assault, not self-harm. The tracking implant is physical proof of surveillance. The timeline of public funeral before confirmed death suggests premeditation. The psychological records, while extensive, appear designed to discredit rather than document. My recommendation: approve asylum. The evidence supports her claim. The principle supports our values. Diplomatic officer, Voss asked. A long pause. The woman looked at Zafira, at Shan, at the medical records. Finally, I maintain my concerns about diplomatic fallout, but if we're willing to accept those consequences, she took a breath. Approve. Under conditions. But approve. Voss nodded. Then we don't need a full hour. Ambassador Shan, the Terran Council's decision is made. You are making a grave mistake, Shan said. His voice was ice. The Valoran Empire has a long memory. This insult will not be forgotten. Neither will abandoning someone to die for refusing forced marriage, Voss replied. We'll deal with diplomatic consequences as they come. This council is not making decisions based on threats. She turned to Zafira. Miss Talon, the Terran Council, grants your asylum request. You are hereby under the protection of Terran law. House Talon no longer has legal claim to your person. You are Fimva. The words took a moment to penetrate. Free. She had won. Against 15% odds. Against her family's constructed narrative. Against political pressure. She had won. However, Voss continued, and Zafira felt the relief freeze. This asylum comes with conditions. You will not reveal Valoran state secrets. You will not engage in political activism against the Valoran Empire. You will undergo integration training to adapt to human society. You will maintain a low profile. Essentially, Miss Talon, you are being granted the right to exist here, but you will do so quietly, without causing further diplomatic complications. The words settled like ash. Victory, but constrained, conditional. She could stay, but only if she remained silent, invisible. A refugee granted space but not voice. Zafira should have felt grateful. She was alive. She was free. She had escaped her family's reach. These conditions were reasonable. The council was protecting both her and Terran interests. But something in her chest rebelled. She had not survived assassination to live as a ghost. She had not claimed her right to choose, only to accept someone else's limitations on those choices. She had not stood before this council and declared her worth only to now accept being diminished. Thane had taught her about freedom, about making choices, about determining her own path. It was time to prove she had learned. Zafira stood. Thank you, Commander. I am grateful for the asylum, truly, but I cannot accept these conditions. The chamber went silent. Voss stared at her. Sean looked triumphant. Thane's expression was carefully blank. I do not want to exist quietly, Zafira continued. Her voice was steady. I do not want to be grateful for scraps of freedom. I want to serve, to defend the values that saved my life. I want to contribute, to matter, to prove that the Council's faith in me is justified not through silent gratitude, but through active dedication. She took a breath, made the leap. I request admission to Terran Defense Force training. I want to serve in your military, to use my valor and tactical knowledge combined with human principles to protect others, to answer distress calls, to carry people out of deserts, to be someone who makes the universe slightly better instead of someone who quietly exists in the margins. The shock was palpable. Valorans did not join human military. It was unthinkable. A noble of House Talon becoming a Terran soldier? Impossible. Miss Talon, Commander Voss said slowly, you understand what you're requesting. Military service is demanding, dangerous. You would be subject to human command structure. You would face prejudice from those who don't trust Valorans. You would be giving up the quiet life we just offered you. I understand. I also understand that Captain Aldrich did not carry me out of that desert so I could live as a footnote. He saved me because he believed every life had value. I want to honor that belief through action, not passive existence. This is preposterous, Ambassador, Sean said. She's clearly unstable. This proves the psychological concerns. No rational Valoran raised in your system would, Zafira interrupted. But I am choosing a different system, one where service is honor, where proving yourself matters more than who your parents were, where worth is earned, not inherited. She looked at Voss directly. You granted me asylum because you believe my testimony, because you chose person over politics. I am asking you to trust that choice fully, not halfway, not with conditions that make me a diplomatic solution rather than an individual. Trust that I can become something more than a problem to be managed. The tactical officer leaned toward Voss, whispered something. The diplomatic officer did the same. A quiet conference. Zafira's fate balanced on whatever they were saying. Thane stood. Commander, if I may. Voss nodded. I've served in the TDF for 18 years. I've seen thousands of recruits. Most join for good reasons. Some join for wrong reasons. But the best ones, the ones who become truly exceptional, are the ones who understand at a bone-deep level what service means, what it gives back. He glanced at Zafira. Miss Talon has that understanding. She's choosing service not because it's easy, but because it's meaningful. That's exactly the kind of person we need. Yes, she's Valoran. Yes, there will be complications. But those complications are worth it if we gain someone with her courage and clarity of purpose. You're biased, Captain, the diplomatic officer said. You rescued her. Of course you want to believe she'll succeed. I am biased, absolutely, but I'm also right. Commander Voss was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Slightly. The expression of someone recognizing something familiar. 32 years ago, she said, I was a young woman from a corporate colony where women were expected to work support roles. Not command, not combat. Support. I wanted to fly, to fight, to lead. I was told repeatedly that I should be grateful for the opportunities I had, that I should accept my place, that wanting more was ungrateful, unrealistic. She stood. I joined the TDF anyway, over my family's objections, over the concerns of recruiters who thought I'd wash out, over the predictions that I'd be a liability. 32 years later, I'm a commander making decisions about asylum cases. Because someone believed that desire to serve mattered more than conventional expectations. She looked at Zafira. Miss Talon, your request for TDF training is approved. You'll report to basic training in 2 weeks. You'll be held to the same standards as every other recruit. Higher probably because people will be watching for you to fail. You'll face prejudice, doubt, suspicion. You will have to prove yourself constantly. And if you wash out, asylum remains, but the quiet conditions apply. Understood. Zafira felt her throat tighten. Understood, Commander. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Basic training is hell, especially for someone who's never experienced human military culture. But if you survive it, if you earn that uniform, you'll have done so on your own merit. No one will be able to claim you were given special treatment. No one will be able to question whether you belong. Voss deactivated the recording system. This hearing is concluded. Miss Talon, welcome to Terran Space. Captain Aldrich, you're assigned as her integration liaison. Get her ready for training. Dismissed. They filed out of the chamber. Zafira's legs felt uncertain. The enormity of what had just happened was still processing. She had asylum. She had purpose. She had chosen not just freedom, but direction. In the corridor, Thane stopped her. You know you just made everything harder, right? You could have accepted the quiet asylum, been safe, anonymous. Instead, you volunteered for one of the most demanding career paths available. I know. Why? Zafira thought about Nyx's message, about her little sister preparing to face the same choices in 4 years, about all the women still trapped in systems that valued them only as commodities. Because maybe is not enough, she said. You told me that we do what we can, help who we can, trust that it creates ripples. If I hide in quiet asylum, I help no one. But if I become a TDF officer, if I prove that a Valoran woman can choose her own path and succeed, maybe that ripple reaches farther. Maybe someday my sister sees what I've done and finds her own courage. Thane studied her face. Then he nodded. All right, then let's make sure you don't just survive training. Let's make sure you excel. Deal. Deal. They shook hands, a human custom, sealing agreement through physical contact, simple, direct, so different from Valoran contracts with their elaborate protocols and binding clauses. Zafira liked it better. 5 years passed like water over stone, shaping, changing, refining. Basic training had been exactly as brutal as promised. 18 weeks of physical hell, cultural adjustment, learning human military protocols, fighting against the assumptions of instructors and fellow recruits who assumed a Valoran noble couldn't handle grunt work. She had handled it, more than handled it. Graduated third in her class. Advanced training brought new challenges. Tactical operations, intelligence analysis, leadership development. Her Valoran education proved valuable. Pattern recognition, strategic thinking, cultural analysis. Combined with human adaptability and initiative, it created something unique. She had proven herself in the field. Dozens of missions, rescues, intelligence gathering, peacekeeping operations, each one another brick in the foundation of respect she was building. Now, 5 years later, she was Lieutenant Zafira Talon. She had kept the house name, not as badge of shame, as reclamation, proof that she had come from that background and chosen to become something different, something better. She commanded a reconnaissance unit, small team, elite, combining valor and tactical precision with human unconventional thinking. They had become legendary in their own right, the unit that could go anywhere, do anything, succeed where others failed. Thane was still her mentor, friend, partner on difficult missions. He had been promoted to major. now trained integration specialists, helping other aliens adapt to human military culture. But he still made time to check in, to offer guidance, to remind her of how far she had come. The coded messages from Nixa arrived monthly. Her sister was 19 now, still trapped in House Talon, but planning, learning, preparing. The messages spoke of a growing network, young Valorans who saw Zafira's example and were questioning the system, planning their own escapes. Change was coming, slow, careful, but coming. Zafira stood in the briefing room of TDF Station Meridian, reviewing mission parameters on the holographic display. Her executive officer, Lieutenant Chen, stood beside her, human, former Special Operations, one of the few who had accepted her from day one without prejudice. "Ma'am, priority alert from command," Chen said, tapping his data pad. "Conference room 3, eyes only. Diplomatic crisis designation." Zafira felt her pulse quicken. Diplomatic crisis. That meant Valoran involvement, possibly related to asylum cases. She moved quickly through the corridors, into the secure conference room, found Commander Voss already present, via holographic projection from Sector Command. The older woman looked grim. "Lieutenant Talon, thank you for responding quickly. We have a situation." Voss activated a star chart, highlighted a border region between Terran and Valoran space. 3 hours ago, 10 Valoran women arrived at our embassy station in the Kepler sector, all claiming asylum, all from noble houses, all refusing arranged marriages. 10. The number hit like a physical blow. Not one desperate woman. 10 acting together. "The Valoran Empire is threatening military response," Voss continued. "They're calling it mass defection, claiming we're actively recruiting their citizens. They've given us 48 hours to return all 10 women or face consequences. Trade embargo at minimum. Possible military action." "And the women?" Zafira asked. "Terrified, determined. They specifically requested you as their advocate. They know your story, Lieutenant. You're the reason they had courage to run." The weight of that settled. She was the reason. Her choice 5 years ago had created ripples, had given others hope. But those ripples had now created a diplomatic crisis that could lead to war. "What does command want me to do?" "Stop a war," Voss said bluntly. "We can't return those women. But we also can't afford armed conflict with the Valoran Empire. Someone needs to negotiate a solution. Someone who understands both cultures. Someone the Valorans might actually listen to." "I'm the last person they'll listen to. I'm proof of defection, of betrayal. Or you're proof that their system is breaking. That change is inevitable. That they can either adapt or watch their empire fracture from within as more and more people choose freedom." Voss leaned forward. "I'm authorizing you to lead the negotiation team. Major Aldrich will accompany you as military liaison. You'll meet with Valoran representatives at a neutral station. Your objective: convince them that granting these women asylum is in everyone's interest. That suppressing this will only accelerate the exodus. That evolution of their cultural practices is necessary. And if I fail, if they refuse, then we grant asylum anyway and prepare for the consequences. But at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have shown that we value dialogue over confrontation." Voss paused. "This is bigger than those 10 women, Lieutenant. This is about what kind of galaxy we want to live in. One where power determines rights, or one where rights exist regardless of power." Zafira nodded slowly. "When do I leave AAA?" "Immediately. Transport's ready. And Lieutenant, those women are counting on you, but so are all the others still trapped. The ones watching to see if escape is possible. This negotiation isn't just about today. It's about tomorrow. About every woman who will face this choice in the future." The hologram flickered off. Zafira stood in the empty conference room. 5 years ago, she had been dying in a desert. One man had chosen to help. Now 10 women had chosen to run. And she was being asked to transform personal escape into systemic change. The responsibility was crushing. It was also exactly what she had trained for. She found Thane in the operations center, gave him the briefing. He absorbed it without comment, then said simply, "When do we leave?" "Now." They assembled the team: diplomatic specialists, cultural advisors, security detail. Within 2 hours, they were aboard a fast courier ship. Within 6 hours, they arrived at Nexus Station, neutral territory, where Terran and Valoran representatives could meet without either side claiming home advantage. The Valoran delegation was already waiting, 6 officials, led by someone Zafira recognized even after 5 years. Ambassador Kelric Shan. He looked older. The silver markings on his face had dulled slightly, but the cold certainty in his eyes remained unchanged. Lieutenant Talon, he said. The title was delivered like an insult. How fitting that you would be sent to defend other traitors. Ambassador Shan, she replied evenly. How fitting that you still view women seeking autonomy as treason. They moved to the conference room, sat across from each other at a long table. The neutral arbitrators took positions at the head. But everyone knew the real negotiation was between Zafira and Shan. The Valoran Empire's position is clear, Shan began. 10 citizens have illegally crossed into Terran space. They are wanted for breach of family contracts, for dishonoring their houses, for violating cultural law. We demand immediate extradition. Terran position is equally clear, Zafira replied. 10 women have requested asylum to escape forced marriage. They fear for their safety. They claim systematic oppression. We are obligated under our laws to grant protection. Your laws do not supersede ours. When your laws violate basic rights, yes, they do. Shan's expression hardened. You speak of rights as if they are universal. They are not. Rights are determined by culture, by tradition, by the collective needs of civilization. And when those collective needs require sacrificing individuals, then individuals must sacrifice. That is the price of order, of stability, of advancement. Zafira leaned forward. Ambassador, 5 years ago, you sat in a hearing room and presented medical records to prove I was mentally unstable. Records my father had constructed over years. You argued I should be returned to Valoran custody for treatment. Do you remember what happened? The Terran Council made a foolish decision, one that has created this current crisis. The Terran Council chose to believe that I had value beyond political utility, and I have spent 5 years proving that choice correct. I've served with distinction. I've saved lives. I've built bridges between humans and Valorans. Not because I was forced to, because I chose to. She gestured to the datapad in front of Shan. Those 10 women are not traitors. They are people who want what I found, the right to choose their own path, to live as something more than bargaining chips. If you force them back, you might reclaim their bodies, but you will lose their loyalty, their potential, their belief that the Valoran Empire deserves their dedication. They have no right to such beliefs. Their duty is clear. Then the Valoran Empire will continue losing its brightest minds. Because I am not unique, Ambassador. There are hundreds like me, thousands. Young Valorans who see the gap between the Empire's claims of superiority and the reality of oppression, who wonder why advancement in technology must come with regression in rights. She pulled up her own data display, showed documentation. In the past 5 years, 47 Valorans have requested asylum in Terran space. 47. That number is accelerating. Last year alone, 15. This year we're on track for 30. And those are just the ones who made it to our borders. How many more are planning? How many are building networks? How many are watching this negotiation right now, deciding whether escape is possible? Shan's jaw tightened. You threaten us with exodus. I'm stating facts. The Valoran Empire can respond to this moment in 2 ways. You can dig in, increase control, make examples of the escapees, tighten restrictions. Or you can recognize that change is inevitable and guide that change rather than resist it. And what change do you propose? That we abandon centuries of tradition, that we restructure our entire civilization because a few malcontents object to their duties? I propose that you recognize arranged marriage without consent is unsustainable, that you create legal frameworks for Valorans to refuse such arrangements without being abandoned to die, that you separate political alliance from personal autonomy. Zafira stood, moved to the window overlooking space. The stars stretched in every direction. Infinite possibilities. 5 years ago, I was dying in a desert because I refused marriage. Today, I command a reconnaissance unit. I've saved 43 lives. I've negotiated three-peace treaties. I've trained 15 integration specialists, not in spite of being Valorant. Because of it, because I combine Valorant analytical thinking with human adaptability. She turned back to Sean. Imagine if those 10 women were not fleeing. Imagine if they were serving the Valorant empire by choice, bringing their talents, their perspectives, their dedication. Not because duty demands it, because purpose inspires it. The empire would be stronger, not weaker. You speak of fantasy, of impossible reformation. 30 years ago, humans thought women couldn't command warships. Commander Voss proved them wrong. 20 years ago, Valorans thought defectors were mentally ill. I proved you wrong. Change happens, Ambassador. The question is whether you guide it or get swept away by it. The room fell silent. Sean studied her. The other Valorant officials whispered among themselves. The arbitrators waited. Finally, Sean spoke. What specifically are you proposing? Progress, not agreement, but willingness to discuss. Zafira felt something shift. The 10 women remain in Terran custody, asylum granted, but not as defectors. As participants in a pilot program, a cultural exchange. They train in Terran systems for 2 years. Then they have a choice. Stay in Terran space or return to the Valorant Empire. If they return, they do so with new skills, new perspectives, and no one can question their loyalty because they chose to come back. And if they don't return, then the Empire must accept that forcing people to stay doesn't build loyalty. Only choosing to stay does. Sean was quiet for a long moment. This would require approval from the High Council. They will not accept easily. Then help me convince them, because the alternative is watching this continue, watching more and more Valorants flee, watching the Empire's reputation crumble and as stories spread of women abandoned in deserts, of families executing their own daughters, of a civilization that claims superiority while practicing oppression. She moved back to the table, sat across from Sean. I know you don't agree with me, Ambassador. I know you believe the old ways are correct, but even you must see that the old ways are dying. The question is what replaces them? Chaos or managed evolution? The negotiation continued for 3 more hours. Points raised, counterpoints offered, compromises discussed. Slowly, impossibly, a framework emerged. The 10 women would be granted temporary asylum, 2-year term, training and integration, then choice. The Valorant Empire would establish a commission to review marriage protocols, not abolish them, but create legal paths for refusal without death sentences. It was not perfect. It was not complete reformation, but it was progress. It was change. It was a crack in the foundation that would widen over time. The agreement was signed at 0300 station time. Everyone was exhausted. But Sapphira felt something else, something that had been building for 5 years. Hope realized. She found Thane in the observation deck. He was watching the stars, probably thinking about all the other distress calls out there, all the other people who needed help. You did it, he said without turning. You stopped a war. I delayed a war, gave both sides room to evolve, but the fundamental conflict remains. Which is why this matters. You didn't solve everything, but you made tomorrow better than today. That's all any of us can do. Zafira stood beside him, looked out at the infinite darkness, at the stars burning against the void. 5 years ago, you carried me out of a desert because you believed one life mattered. Today, 10 women have a future because of that choice, because you showed me that freedom was possible. That choice existed. She thought about Nixa, about the message, about her sister who was 19 now, who had watched Zafira's example, who was planning her own path. In 4 years, my sister will face the choice I did, but now she has options I didn't. Because of this agreement, because of the precedent, she can refuse marriage and live. Maybe not easily, but she can live. Thane nodded, and in 10 years, 20. How many more will have that choice? I don't know, but however many it is, it starts here with one man who answered a distress call, who risked himself for a stranger, who believed that doing right mattered more than doing easy. She turned to face him. Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for teaching me about freedom, for believing I could become more than a refugee. You gave me a chance, and I've tried to give others the same chance. You've done more than that, Thane said. You've proved that change is possible, that systems can evolve, that courage is contagious. 5 years ago, you were alone. Today, there's a network. Tomorrow, there will be more. That's the ripple. That's the hope. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars, thinking about all the women still trapped, all the distress calls waiting to be answered, all the futures waiting to be chosen. Zafira's communication device chimed. A priority message. She checked it. From Nixa. Short, encrypted, but clear. I see what you've done. I see the agreement. I see the path. In 4 years, I will make my choice, and I will not be afraid, because you showed me courage is possible. Thank you, sister, for living free, for living loud, for proving that maybe is enough when maybe leads to change. Zafira read it twice, felt tears threatening, blinked them back. 5 years ago, she had been left to die for refusing marriage. Today, she had negotiated a framework that would save lives. Tomorrow, her sister would have choices. The cycle continuing, the ripple spreading, one life at a time, one choice at a time, one woman at a time choosing freedom. It would not change Valoran's society overnight, but it was changing. The network growing, the foundation cracking, the old ways dying, and at the center of it all, Lieutenant Zafira Talon, officially dead, actually alive, living proof that the choice was always there, waiting, ready, the choice to be more than what others demanded, to claim autonomy, to serve something larger than self, the choice to live free. The stars stretched endlessly, each one a possibility, each one a future waiting to be claimed. Somewhere out there, 10 women were beginning new lives. Somewhere out there, Nixa was planning her escape. Somewhere out there, others were watching, learning, hoping. Because sometimes when the universe is kind, one person's choice creates ripples. Sometimes help arrives. Sometimes the decision to do what's right rather than what's easy changes everything. And sometimes that changed life goes on to change others. That was the ripple. That was the hope. That was the future they were building. One choice at a time,